and see if I'll address it. All right, I'm finally good. All right. So, yeah, you guys, I'm sure, do you guys just invite random people into your house to come hang out? Just, without really knowing them, say, hey, you know what, let's just come to our house, and I don't know you, and just come in, hang out with us, and I have no idea who you are. Most of us probably don't do that. And we don't do that because of our security, right? We're concerned about the kind of people that we bring into the household. But what about your friend, your child going to a friend's house? Do you just let them go to any old friend's house? What kind of questions do you ask your kid? If they're like, hey, so and so from school invited me to come hang out with them after school or something. What kind of questions or what do you ask your kid when they're asking permission to go visit a friend's house? What are some things you guys might ask your kid? Yeah, Bree? Can you tell me a little bit about your friend? What else? Yeah, Rico? Yeah, you go meet their parents?
A lot of times the neighbor kids, they don't come into the house, I don't think it's rude, I think.
Yeah. Growing up for me, it was a lot of the same things. Like my parents were very selective about who I got to hang out with, especially when I was young. They did not want me just talking and hanging out with anybody because they wanted me to only have good influences in my life. Sometimes our technology, in a sense, can be like that. Strangers, in a sense, can come into your house through technology without proper supervision. It's kind of like inviting somebody over without screening them. When you give them access to the World Wide Web, you're, in a sense, opening up your house to strangers unless there is proper supervision and steps taken to where they are not doing that. So I just wanted to start off with just some scriptures on parenting and just kind of how this fits in there. So Deuteronomy 6:6-8. You guys, anybody know what that scripture is? All right, well, let's go ahead and look that up. So Deuteronomy chapter 6, verses 6-8, or verses 6-8. And somebody want to read that for us? I think we can probably all hear each other. And let's go ahead and start with, actually, let's back up. Let's start in verse 4. It says this, Hear, O Israel, the Lord our God, the Lord is one. You shall love the Lord your God with all your heart, with all your soul, and with all your might. And these words that I command you today shall be on your heart. You shall teach them diligently to your children, and shall talk about them when you sit in your house, and when you walk by the way, when you lie down, and when you rise. You shall bind them as a sign on your hand, and they shall be as frontlets between your eyes, and you shall write them on the doorposts of your house and on your gates. So in this, we're commanded by the Lord that we're to love the Lord our God with all our heart, soul, mind, and strength. So you guys have probably all heard that. But what's interesting, kind of following underneath of that, is there's instructions that we are to do what? In verse 7, we're to teach them diligently to our children. And essentially, it's going to be a part of our life when we're sitting down, when we're going by our way, when we lie down, when we rise. Essentially, as a part of our everyday life, we're to be teaching our youth and our children and instruct them in the ways of the Lord. Proverbs 22:6 is another verse that has a lot to say about parenting. Train up a child in the way he should go. Even when he is old, he will not depart from it. In Ephesians 6:4, fathers, do not provoke your children to wrath. Instead, bring them up in two things, the discipline and instruction of the Lord. Okay, when you think about discipline in that context, what we might be thinking of initially is the idea of like our child has done something wrong, and so they need to be grounded. But a lot of times when the Bible's talking about discipline, it's talking about a way of life. Not just like, oh, you've done something wrong, so now it's time for you to, you're grounded for the rest of your life. Or some of us might have had that happen. In Psalm 78, verses 1-4, we'll just read verse 4 here. We will not hide them from our children, but tell to the coming generation the glorious deeds of the Lord and his might and the wonders he has done. So there's a imperative, according to the psalmist, that we retell our children, the next generation, what the Lord has done in our life and in the lives prior and throughout the life of our church and in Scripture. So one of the analogies I think is helpful is to think about parenting as shepherding. So when you think about a shepherd, what kind of roles does a shepherd have? What does a shepherd do? Guiding, yes. Yeah, Brent?
Just out of curiosity, is it intentional that babies are missing?
Nope. You might have got the defective copy. What's that? That happened to all of them? I'm sorry about that. Well, anyway, I guess I'll try to get you guys, I'll tell you what, after we're done tonight, if it's all right with you guys, I'll just email out my notes, and then that way you guys will have that copy of them, and you can look through them there. So yes, guiding is definitely a role of a shepherd. What other roles does a shepherd have? What's that? Protect, yes. Any other ones? What's that? Yeah, they watch over the sheep. Very good. So they know their sheep, right? So I have some scripture references up there. That's Jesus says, "I know my sheep." So in other words, we just don't. They're not just a part of our flock. We actually know each individual sheep, their personalities, what they're like, what they don't like, etc. They also love and care for their sheep. So that might be like if a sheep is wounded, you will nurture and care for that sheep that is wounded, and you will even perhaps lay down your life for that sheep. Shepherds also lead their sheep. That I heard somebody said guide. And in Psalm 23, we're told that he leads them by still waters. So there's an idea of leadership that's involved. What's kind of interesting in today's culture is just kind of an aside. I think a lot of times kids are leading the household, where it's not so much about parents leading their children. It's about, hey, what do you want to do? And letting the children make all the decisions instead of parents actually leading their kids. Shepherds are to provide and feed their sheep, which I think you guys do an excellent job at. They protect their sheep. And they correct and train their sheep. That's maybe something you didn't think of, but you have you might not. I actually was watching this the other day. This is one of the pointless things you watch on the internet. I saw a sheep get stuck in a tire swing, which was a lot of fun to watch for me. Probably not so fun for that sheep. And that sheep obviously needed to learn you don't go trying to jump through the hole in the tire swing. So if you guys are bored sometimes, go watch that video of the sheep in the tire swing, and it cannot escape. All right, shepherds pursue their sheep. So sometimes our sheep stray. We've probably seen this even in our kids where they begin to go where they're not supposed to. And sometimes we got to go chase them down and stop them from going a direction that they should not be going. All right, so this is just kind of overall, why do we even have a youth and children's ministry? Maybe you've never asked yourself this question or thought about it, but it's a mutual relationship between myself as a youth pastor, Jan, who's stepping up as our children's minister, that we are to have as the relationship between parents and youth and children's ministry. It's our job as a youth pastor and as children's ministry workers and volunteers is to support you guys as parents, as you're leading your children, but we're never going to supplant you guys in your role as a spiritual leader in the home. So we support, we don't supplant. When you think about it, in terms of the amount of time that's spent with your children and their discipleship, a lot of it comes from the family. It's actually been said that more is caught than taught. So as good of a job as we can try to do as a youth ministry and as children's ministry, they're going to learn way more from you guys as parents. And I know it might seem like I'm putting a lot on you guys, but being parents, there is a lot of responsibility that comes to the spiritual leadership of your church. I'm never going to be the child's parent. I want to do my best to be a mentor, but I'm never going to take your responsibility. So I kind of already went over that. So volunteers and workers, we bring in a complementary perspective in terms of your children. A lot of times we emphasize the same things. I've experienced this even as a youth pastor, where I'll be harping on something with the youth group for months, and then we go to summer camp and the speaker says the same thing I've been saying for months, and the youth will be like, man, I've never heard that before. And you're sitting there like, we've been talking about this for like 5 months. And maybe you've experienced that as parents where, they come home from youth group or children's ministry and it's like, I've been trying to teach you this for like a year. And they said it, and now all of a sudden it sticks in your head. So for whatever reason, sometimes it's hearing a different voice helps your child just maybe realize something new or maybe just hears it from a different perspective that maybe sticks with them a little bit better. And a lot of times it's the same things you guys are saying. There is some research done by Fuller Youth Institute is its name. It's called the Sticky Faith Initiative. And, the idea of the Sticky Faith Initiative was how is it that we can raise the youth and children up to where they're going to maintain their faith? Because a lot of the research was kind of showing, and you guys have probably all seen this too, like you have people who've grown up in the church, and then when they become a young adult, they go away from the church, right? They lose their faith, they go start pursuing other things, and all of a sudden they're not following Christ. What their research says is that it seemed that the youth who stuck it out had approximately at least 5 adults, invested adults in their life who helped grow them up in the Lord, and it wasn't just their parents. So that means that there's your parents, but also some other adults that are working with your youth and children. So that's the kind of the mutual relationship that's going on here. We have the end goal in sight, which is we all want our youth and children to be following after the Lord, and we're in this together. All right, so one of the reasons I wanted to touch on social media and technology, and Pastor Sean, I think, has been covering this the last couple months, is wokeism. So some of you guys who maybe been with Pastor Sean, anybody know what wokeism is? Kind of put a definition up there for you. You guys remember some of Pastor Sean's, maybe? You guys are like, I was not expecting Pastor Andrew to put me on the spot. But yes, the idea of wokeism is we're going to understand everything, history, economics, race, sexuality, gender, etc., through a culturally Marxist lens. Now, Pastor Sean has a whole series of videos on that. If you missed some of them, he'll talk about cultural Marxism. Essentially, we're going to treat people as a part of their identity group. And we're going to look at where they are and identify like what form of oppression they are, and we're going to view entire life through that lens. So a lot of it's all about figuring out who's oppressed and who is not. So the individual who's presenting right now is the oppressor. The straight, white, what's called cisgendered male is the oppressor and privileged. If you don't know what cisgender means, that means that your gender matches your body, which I didn't think I would ever have to learn what that meant. But that is a part of what it is. So for myself, because I am straight, white, cisgender, and a Christian on top of that, that makes me the oppressor. Everybody else is not. So any disparity that we see is because of some oppression or privilege. So if there's any disparity at all, it has to be because there's some inherent, the big buzzword right now is racism, right? There's some inherent racism that's going on. That's why we see all these great disparities. One of the examples that I encountered was mathematics. There was some, actually, do you teach math? Science. Okay, so maybe it's coming to science eventually. But there was actually something going on for standardized testing where they said that this math test was racist. And you might go, how in the world could they say a math test was racist? Well, the reason they could say that math test was racist is because minority students weren't performing as well as white or Asian students. So there's something must be wrong with the test because everybody should be performing the same. That was the thought. So that's what made the test racist. What?
Oregon State Department of Education just put out a thing where they said, we want our teachers to study this, which basically says, by definition, all math in the classroom is racist.
Yeah, so it's probably, if it's not in Colorado yet, it's probably coming eventually. What I thought was interesting is, thankfully out here in rural Colorado, there's a bit of insulation that we have being out here in rural Colorado from some of the things that come through our education system. This is a bit of a bunny trail, but I actually read through their what they were supposed to be teaching coming up in the future regarding like sex ed, and it's pretty crazy stuff that they're wanting to push as far as their agenda. Thankfully, out here in rural Colorado, I think there's still a lot of conservative values, but other places, especially I think the newer teachers are going to come more from that perspective and be expecting to teach what the state wants. So I would encourage you guys, if you want to know, go read kind of what their curriculum objectives are. I don't know if I should probably say it online, but well, it's a really bad. One of the things that stood out to me is that we are, as educators, if you're teaching about sex ed, you're not supposed to say anything regarding abstinence as a viable alternative to, I guess, a preventative of STDs or something like that. You're not supposed to talk about abstinence anymore. So apparently the state doesn't want that because that's too crazy for them. So I bring that up because educators, social media giants, which is what we're going to get to, corporations and politicians are definitely pushing this agenda. And the problem with this is that this worldview, the culturally Marxist one, is against the biblical worldview. Why? Predominantly because the Bible sees us as individuals first, and versus the group identities that they are trying to see in wokeism. So God doesn't look at us and go, okay, that's a white male, so I need to get my criteria to judge a white male. Okay, now this is a African American woman, so I need to get my criteria out for judging this person. That's not how God judges. He shows no favoritism. That's what he says in James. So let's talk about smartphones because, in a sense, it's a discipleship tool. And it might mean that your children and even ourselves, we can be being discipled by what's coming up through technology. So what do gambling and addiction have to do with smartphones and social media? Well, gambling, it's all about the reward mechanism, in particular with slot machines, which keeps people there constantly all day playing slot machines, which keeps people glued to their phones. Have you ever seen that person who can't put their phone down? Maybe it's your kid, maybe it's not your kid, but maybe it's a different kid or somebody else, or maybe it's a coworker at work. It's like, would you just get off that phone? And maybe you're wondering, like, what makes a person so glued to their phone? It actually goes all the way back to B.F. Skinner. So we'll see, bonus. Not that I actually can give out any prizes, but bonus points for whoever remembers who B.F. Skinner is. Yeah? Yeah, yes, he was. He was a behavioral psychologist. Yeah. It was all about classical conditioning. So it was classical conditioning was all about rewards and punishment, or positive and negative reinforcement. That all comes from B.F. Skinner. And he came up with this pigeon experiment. So this is like, why are we talking about pigeons? But in this pigeon experiment, what he found is he had pigeons with a little lever, and whenever they hit the lever, food would come out. And every time they hit the lever, food comes out. And so the pigeon learns, oh, if I hit this lever, food comes out. Well, what he eventually discovered through this process is that if there are random rewards that come out of this lever, the pigeon actually hits it more than if it gets a reward every time. So it's like the occasional random reward, and that pigeon just keeps going after that little device, that little lever to get more food. Well, it's the same thing with a slot machine. So you guys ever wonder why people spend slot machines? They're randomized, and people keep putting that money in. So eventually, hopefully, they get that reward and that payout. So it keeps people glued to the slot machine. Well, our smartphone developers use the same sort of behavioral science, in particular with apps. A lot of the apps that are on smartphones, that uses that same kind of technology to keep people glued into it, in particular with like games. A lot of the free games that are out there, there's various rewards to kind of keep your kids involved with playing those games consistently. And the reason they want to be playing those games is it's playing into this behavioral I guess, tendency that we have. So that's why they're so interested in a lot of those games, and sometimes even social media, is that reward mechanism that's involved with even something like slot machines. You guys have questions on that? All right. So what about addiction? Well, you might be like, how could somebody get addicted to something that's just a device and not, a substance? Well, what happens is there's a brain chemical that's released often when you're on your phone called dopamine, and that's when your brain is rewarded for certain activities. So actually grabbed my counseling textbook, which I thought was interesting, and it had a whole section on how do you know whether or not somebody is dependent upon a substance. So instead of when I read substance, think cell phone, and see if this describes anybody you know. And some of these were a little bit of ouch for me when I was reading through this, just substituting in cell phone. So let me just read a few of these. So the person uses more of the substance or cell phone, or uses it for a longer time than intended. You guys ever had that last part gets me. It's like, oh yeah, I was just on to check Instagram. 30 minutes later, I'm still on. Yeah, so that one caught me when I read that. So here's the second one. The person recognizes excessive use of the substance and may have tried to reduce it, but has been unable to do so. So yeah, maybe you've been like, man, I need to spend less time on my cell phone. And then you find yourself, oh, man, I can't quite get off of it as much as I would like. Much of the person's time is spent in efforts to obtain the substance or cell phone and recover from its effects. Now, I know there was a time when I was in high school I was like this with video games, where it was like I was just trying to figure out how I could get out of schoolwork so I could go play more video games. So my whole day was spent around scheming on how to get more time playing video games. So yeah, I was addicted to my video games. Now, thankfully, at some point, I had the wherewithal, even as a 17-year-old, and I just realized I got to sell this thing because I can't handle it. So I ended up selling my video game device. So I'm really glad I did, because I couldn't handle it in the household because I was so glued into it. All right, so here's some other ones. The person is intoxicated or suffering from withdrawal symptoms at times when responsibilities need to be fulfilled, such as at school or work. You guys ever had that person, if they forget their cell phone at home, they panic? That would be an example of a withdrawal symptom. So if your kid forgets their phone, in their bedroom or at home, and they went to school all day and they're in a panic, oh man, where's my cell phone? Probably a good tendency they might be a little bit dependent on that device. So many activities are given up or reduced in frequency because of the use of the substance. Tolerance develops requiring larger doses. And last but not least, the person uses the substance to relieve withdrawal symptoms. So in other words, that's the person realizes I'm kind of having a bit of an anxiety panic attack, so I need my cell phone. And once I have my cell phone, I'm back, everything's back normal. So you guys know people like this? When I was looking at the publishing date of this textbook, this technically resource that I have, it was published in the year 2000. So I was like, this is really before smartphone technology took off. So after I read this, I was like, man, could I just change the title of this to drugs, alcohol, and cell phones? So it's just an update that I might suggest to our publisher. So that dopamine mechanism, which is all about addiction, taps into your moods and behavior and habits. Now, how many teenagers do you guys think percentage-wise own a smartphone? Now, I'm not talking children right now, but teenagers. How many teenagers percentage-wise do you think own a smartphone? 95? That's actually pretty high, but I wish it was much lower than that. The stat I found today was 53%, which to me seemed low. It seemed low to me when I found that. And all my teachers and all my adults are saying it's probably more. So they might need to redo their survey, whoever came up with 53%. So here's some addiction statistics. Some teens spend at least 5+ hours on their phone, but they also have 71% more likely to be suicidal. 67% of teachers say their students are negatively distracted. So we have a few teachers in here. Can you guys verify that? Yeah. So 22%, and this is a little bit older, of 18 to 29-year-olds admit to checking their device every few minutes. So and that's just what they admit. Most of us have kind of that positive bias. My bet is that it's probably a greater amount than that. Because a lot of us, like when it comes to these surveys, we want to project ourselves as better than we really are. Well, I don't really do that. Well, this is self-reporting. So if we were to study people, I think it would probably be more. 41% of teenagers feel overwhelmed by notifications. Notifications is when basically your phone buzzes, like you got a text or, you got somebody posted something on YouTube or something like that, and your phone is buzzing at you, letting you know that, something in the world is going on. 1 in 2 teens, and I've actually seen this one, will sit in silence while they're with their friends, just hanging out and just sitting there on their smartphones. So you guys maybe have seen your kid do this where they're with a group of their friends and they're just sitting around in a circle all on their devices. And it's like nobody's saying anything. I remember one time this was a few years ago, this is back when Village Inn used to have a buy anything and get a free piece of pie. I don't know if you guys remember those days, but Village Inn had that. So like post-youth group, myself and some youth, we would go to Village Inn on Wednesday night after we were done with youth group and have pie. And I remember one time being there and just, sitting at the table with this group of students. And, I was looking around the table and they were all busy texting. And, I just like, nobody was saying anything to anybody. And I actually did make a comment about that. It's like, I'm so glad I came here to have a conversation with you guys. Because it's just, there wasn't a single word being shared. And, I was trying to get a conversation going and they were too busy checking. He's like, our youth group was so long, an hour and a half, and I need to catch up with what's going on in the Facebook or Twitter or Instagram world. All right, so how would you know if your teen or child is addicted? Here are some possible signs. So conscious use in prohibited contexts. So for example, you're not supposed to be using it in a particular area, like when you're driving. And if you're texting when you're driving, it's probably an indication you may be addicted. Using the use causes conflict and also causes familial withdrawal. In other words, it's like I'm not engaging with my family as much, and when my family calls me out for my behavior on cell phones or any other kind of electronics, there's conflict. There's a resentment that is brewing because of their engagement with that media. It could also negatively affect one's school, social, or family and emotional functions. They feel an immediate need to respond to messages and alerts. You guys ever wondered that? Like, I've noticed this even in myself sometimes. It's like my phone buzzes and it's like I'm reaching for it right away versus like, you know what? It's at my convenience. I don't have to answer it right now. If I answer it an hour later, that's okay. Sometimes I have to remind myself that. There's increased anxiety or irritability if the phone is inaccessible. And there's some uneasy feelings if it's not being used. If it's not using, I'm a little bit like anxious and wondering what's going on. So here's some other questions you might ask yourself. Is my child that I have irritable, anxious, or violent when that phone is taken away or unable to be used? So in other words, if you take that phone away for a period of time, are they getting irritated and angry with you guys? Does your child skip or avoid events to use the smartphone instead? And by the way, guys, I was just thinking about this as I was preparing for the night, is we could actually extend this to be almost like any kind of form of media or electronics. Like some of these questions would work for something like video games or TV shows or Netflix or Hulu or those kind of things. It's not just limited to cell phones. That's just what I chose to focus on for tonight. Does smartphone use interfere with my child's normal sleep? What's interesting on this is that there's been a lot of studies done on this. There's something about the screen glow that actually keeps people up longer. So like, people just playing around their cell phones, I think it's like 30 minutes to an hour before bed, they need to be off so you can actually go to sleep. So it takes your brain a little bit to deprogram so you can have a better, more restful sleep. And is my child's hygiene, friends, family, or school work affected negatively? So Maybe that's the case, maybe not. Big ones for social media. Some of you guys who are probably in education probably know some things about these sites as well. I'm just doing a brief overview. So if you got something you think is important about some of these sites that I'm touching on, feel free to chime in what you remember. Maybe you've been trained on some of these. So chances are, if your child has a smartphone, or if your kid is going to end up with a smartphone, they're going to want to be on a social media platform. And with each particular platform, there's delights and dangers. And I'm just going to cover the main four for teenagers. And believe it or not, it's most likely going to be where you are not as a parent. Teens have a way of migrating away from the sites where adults are. So Facebook, I remember this when I was in college, that was all for the college students. And then all the old people got on there, and so we couldn't be on Facebook anymore. That's what they would say. Same thing with Twitter and everything else. So here's some of the sites that you've maybe heard of: Facebook, Twitter, Snapchat, Instagram, Twitch, WhatsApp, YouTube, and TikTok. Those are just some of the main ones that are out there. We're just going to look at tonight TikTok, Instagram, YouTube, and Snapchat. And we'll take at the main four. So the Snapchat will be our first one. All right, does anybody here have anybody here on Snapchat? Yeah, we got one. All right, I'm actually on Snapchat with my family, so I know a little bit about this. So Snapchat was created in 2011, and what put it on the map is that it was known for what was thought to be temporary content. Now, I put screenshots can be taken because what youth were doing is they were sending screenshots that they thought would disappear, and then people would take a screenshot of whatever image was being shared, and then it was no longer temporary. Now, when this first got started, it was actually kind of known as the sexting app, because youth and children even, unfortunately, were using this to send inappropriate photos to each other because they thought like it was disappearing content. And so, it's just going to be out there and it's going to disappear, and so on and so forth. I know of a few instances, even in this community, where Snapchat was a medium where there was some investigation done with youth and children, because that was initially what was going on. So a user can craft a story on Snapchat for approximately 24, that's available for 24 hours. One of the reasons it was popular is for the filters. The filters just puts like a goofy face on you or something like that, give you like puppy face or dog ears, or make you look like an old man or a baby, or whatever else. It's just thought to be just kind of fun. And it could be. It could be just a fun thing that youth are doing with each other. But that's one of the most popular things that they do on Snapchat. Now, you have to manually add friends to send content to each other, but there is a way to make it public to where almost anybody, especially with your stories, could see what you're sharing. So since its inception, Snapchat has made the news for bullying and sexting. I mentioned sexting earlier, but why do you think this would be a platform people would use for bullying? Yeah, they're sending them on, and also I can say something to somebody and it's going to disappear. Nobody's going to know I said it. It's going to be my word against their word. So those are the two. And that, yes, and you're right. It's actually a little bit of blackmail there, where I'll take a screenshot of what you thought was temporary and use it against you later. The streak function, in particular, it increases the addictive qualities of Snapchat and can make or break even friendships. Now, if a streak is based upon the number of days you sent a photo back and forth to each other. So there's almost like, I got to keep up with my Snap streak. And what's interesting about the whole Snap streak function that you'll find is that there's almost like if you don't have that streak going, your friend will be upset with you because you forgot to send a snap that day. There's been friendships that have broken off because of that, and that's why there are some people that I know, like if they know they're going to be outside of cell phone reception, they'll try to give their phone to somebody else and like keep my streaks going. So it's all about that, trying to keep that streak of consecutive days where we've sent those photos to one another. It could even reveal personal information and location without the proper app settings. In other words, if you're not really going into the privacy settings into that particular app, you could be making your location public, which could be a problem. In fact, this is one of the things that I do. Like if I'm going on vacation somewhere, a lot of times I won't post photos about my vacation until when I get back, because I feel like, for me anyway, it's almost like advertising. Hey, people who are up to no good, my house is empty. Come see what you can find. So I just tend to wait till I come back from vacations before I even post that I was on vacation. Because of its temporary nature, it could be difficult to monitor who is the friend of one's child, and it's potentially difficult to monitor because of the idea that things are there and then they disappear. So like, whereas like Facebook and Twitter and and even Instagram, there are settings to where like you can actually kind of see what was been posted, because the intention of Snapchat was to just put up an image for a temporary time and then it disappears. It can be difficult to monitor as a parent. And ideally, 13 years old is the minimum age required to use Snapchat. So you guys have any questions on Snapchat? As I mentioned, it can be a lot of fun. Like I've used it with my family, just sending, because I have a bunch of nephews and nieces, and they like to see like videos of my dogs, or me with a goofy camera filter making funny voices or something. So it can be fun, but it takes, I think, a wise user to use it well. And there's a lot of temptations that are out there for younger people. All right. Instagram was the most popular app. It is now the second most popular app. We're going to get to the actually, random poll. What do you guys think is the most popular social media app for youth right now? Yeah, I'm hearing everybody saying TikTok, and that's right. It's TikTok is the most popular. This is the second most popular app, which is Instagram. So it's a popular free app, which is owned by Facebook, that was launched in 2010, bought by Facebook, and now owned by them. You can post and view pictures and videos. The videos can be up to 1 hour, and that's the main platform, or what you're doing on the main platform is posting and viewing pictures and videos. Now, we probably have a few Instagram people here, right? I'm assuming. No? All right, we got a couple. Yeah, we got a couple Instagram people that are here. All right. So you can send direct messages to make contact with people. So that's like a private message, and even a disappearing message. Technically, you need to be 13 years old to use, but like Snapchat and honestly anything that comes towards an age requirement, it's really easy to fake your age. So all you got to do is declare your birth date, so you can make yourself 50 years old and sign up for it. So it's pretty easy to fake how old you are. Content often depends on who is being followed. So that's one of the features of Instagram, is their influencers is what they're called, that you can follow. Usually they have a public account, so it could be anybody that's out there that you think is really interesting. So for example, I like to follow people like I kind of enjoy the outdoors, so I'll follow guys that are into like hunting and fishing and those sorts of things. So you can follow that and get the content that is curated towards your taste. And it could be educational, or it can be perverse. It kind of depends on who they are choosing to follow on Instagram. One of the things that's been coming up is that there's a lot of teens in particular that will do what is called multiple accounts. That's basically, we have the parent approved account and my friend account that they don't know about. So in other words, like a lot of times parents make a rule, which is probably a good rule, that if you're going to be on Instagram, I need to be your friend so I can see what you're doing. Well, a lot of times they'll go like, okay, and they'll kind of have their benign, innocuous account, and then they'll have their secret account that the parents aren't supposed to know about, where I can kind of go do my thing and without them knowing. So there are occasions, there's settings on Instagram where you could block your parents, for example, one's parents, from viewing the content that's on there. That's one of the features it has. One of the other things with Instagram is they have what's called the endless scroll. I mentioned it earlier. That's one where I found myself. You just start going through pictures and they never end. And you could be there all day just looking at all the different pictures that are up on there. Now you could, and now to Instagram's credit, they have built in your activity function, which is supposed to notify you of how much time you're spending on it, but you have to activate it and use it for it to be of any use to you. So some issues that have come up is bullying is a major problem on Instagram. People make dummy fake accounts, and then I can post what I really think, and nobody's going to know it's me. So basically, it's this idea that I'm going to call myself Clark Kent, and then I'm going to post whatever I want and pretend like, and then it's not going to know it's me. It's Clark Kent. They're not going to know who Clark Kent is. So bullying has been a problem because of that. Perfectionism and vanity is also a problem with this because everybody tries to put their best photos up. So everybody thinks like, oh, this is what, to be a cute looking teenage girl, this is what I need to look like. So it could be a potential problem with like body image issues, not just with girls, but also with boys, and just a certain vanity that comes with that. As with any platform, the location and the contact with strangers is always a risk. So Instagram is out there. It can be really good if you are very intentional with it, but it can have a lot of negative side effects if teens aren't careful. You guys have questions on Instagram? So Brent and Connie, you guys are both on that. So what's been your take on Instagram? Like it, dislike it, or it's okay? What's that? Okay. Oh, so you use like the ads, or you put like this is what we're doing as a business? Yeah. Okay. Yep. Good.
I find it's more upbeat than some of the things on Facebook.
Yeah. It's more video, it's more picture and video driven as opposed to Facebook, which is a lot of text a lot of times. Like versus reading text, you're going to see more videos. All right, so this is going to be this is actually the number one app. You guys were talking about it, which is TikTok. And this really took off during COVID era. I jokingly called it the new kid on the block, but it's actually been around for a while. It's just really exploded during quarantine time because it was a way to share, view, and create video content. Users can combine music and video content on this to make funny, silly, clever, or innovative video short. The idea is to have creativity of some kind. Like we're really trying to put a premium on creativity. Again, like a lot of social media sites that are out there, you can have either public and private settings. Public means anybody can see it. Private means only to my friends. And supposedly, you're only supposed to be 13 years, or at least 13 years old to jump on it. There is a kid function on TikTok as well, but we'll get into that here in a second. It does have some safety controls for parents to restrict access and mature content. And there's no tool out there, as much as I would like to say that there's 100% foolproof tools, there is no tool out there that's 100% foolproof. It helps, but it's not going to stop all the content. So TikTok challenges are one of the most popular features there, which is usually some song, dance, activity, which encourage people to participate. Do you guys remember the Ice Bucket Challenge? You guys remember that? It's things like that, except it's usually like a music song or when some choreographed dance that you're supposed to do. All right, there is some time management tools on there, like screen time. You can restrict, you can pair it to your account so you can see what your kid is up to. But our government has expressed some concern because a Chinese company developed this, and there's a question of how much of our user data does the Chinese government know? So there is kind of a privacy and concern that was expressed. I don't know if Biden has rolled this back, but I know when Trump was talking about TikTok as a platform, I think he forbade federal government employees from downloading and using the app because he was very concerned about the Chinese ownership in companies. So there is some that is out there. And like anything with videos, there can be inappropriate videos found. Just so you know, there is kind of an underlying pressure for kids to want to become famous on this because there are TikTok influencers that even kids who've made it big and made a lot of money. So there can be some pressure that, hey, I want to be like this kid, make a lot of money. And not all inappropriate content is going to be able to be filtered. One of the things that has also come as bullying is there's a feature where you can do a mirror where like there's going to be, so you have your video and then somebody jumps on and is mirroring your video and just making faces, making fun of you the whole time that you're doing what you're doing. And it's kind of a very, another way that some kids or youth have used this to bully each other. Honestly, this is one of the platforms I have not gone on myself. I'm a little paranoid about China. So this is one where I'm like, yeah, I'm probably not going to do it. And I might be a little extra paranoid on that, but the whole Chinese fingers in it just makes me nervous. All right, this is probably the biggest one in terms of the video services that is out there. Yeah.
I had one, and my son, I sent one thing ever.
On TikTok?
And he had a fit, and he said, do you know what's really on this thing? And he researched with China. And the government said they were going to get rid of it. And then Walmart, and I can't remember who the other one was, came in and purchased a portion of it. So it's still up for grabs as to whether it's all Chinese driven or not.
Yeah.
But it's still, majority is owned by a Chinese company.
Yeah. And the thought is like Chinese company and Chinese government are almost equivalent. And when it comes towards programming and algorithms, whoever developed the code, they're going to know how to get in. So that's why it's been a concern. So YouTube, you guys have probably all heard of that. It's the largest, most downloaded video streaming service on the internet. Very, very popular. It's owned by Google. YouTube is known for its influencers, or who are known as YouTubers. And now, any YouTubers here that your kids like I know there's any YouTubers that your kids like to watch. Okay, so I bet there is a Lego YouTuber out there. I don't know what they'd be called, but I bet there is one. Depends on what you're into. You can find anything from educational to the inappropriate on YouTube. Actually, I've used this when I've taught classes, or even in youth group. I've used various YouTube videos that I have found that have been very good. So you can find some really good things, and you can find some very inappropriate things. Technically, you're supposed to be 13 years old or up. There is a YouTube Kids out there, which is supposed to screen out mature and sensitive content, but from what I've found, it's not really all that reliable. But there is a function YouTube Kids out there. There is some control settings that you can use on the app, like time, like how much time my kid can spend watching videos, which that's a good tool to have. And also watch history. So watch history is like, what videos have my kid been watching? Probably kind of good to know what kind of videos that your kids are into. There is, although, that being said, if you have a child who's trying not to be discovered, you can erase your watch history. So there is where there is a will, there is a way. And kids are very smart sometimes, or I don't say smart, intelligent about how they're trying to get away with things. So the main and pressing issue that YouTube is dealing with is that it's really difficult to effectively monitor all the videos that are published. Like really millions of videos and creators are out there publishing things. I forget what the stat is. It's crazy how many videos are being produced like every day, every minute. So for YouTube to have algorithms and everything else out there to screen out everything that is coming up that's inappropriate or bullying or whatever, it's really hard to keep up with it. So they're trying to, but the content's almost overwhelming. So one of the things that you can do is have comments on videos. Most of the comments, I don't think I would let kids read because most of them are inappropriate and negative rather than positive. And it's intentionally designed to only be for users 13 years old and up. Videos without comments are supposed to be for those under 13, or perhaps as the user who's like, I don't want to have a debate, so I'm just going to disable my comments so I don't have to listen to what anybody has to say. My video's out there, I don't have to listen to anybody else. So the restricted mode And YouTube Kids helps, but they're not foolproof, as I mentioned. All right, so you guys have any questions on the main platforms? So just to cover, you have YouTube, Snapchat, Instagram, and TikTok. So some of our teachers here, what have you guys seen, or maybe some of the training you guys have had in school, what platforms have been mentioned to keep an eye on? All of them? Yeah. So here's some of the general traps that are involved with any social media site. Teens and children feel pressure to achieve status through digital likes. So like I post a video or I post a picture and I'm expecting to see X amount of likes. And when I don't get that X amount of likes, there's depression or anger that comes as a result. And maybe you've even found this yourself. Like maybe you posted something on, doesn't matter if it was Instagram, Facebook, Twitter, you posted something and it's like, that didn't get retweeted nearly as much as I wanted to, or I didn't get nearly as many likes on Facebook as I wanted to get out of that thing I posted. I thought it was really clever what I posted on Facebook. I didn't get my likes, so, you start getting a little frustrated. And that's an example of some of the traps that teens feel as well with other things, like trying to achieve those digital likes. One of the other things that's out there, I've mentioned it a few times, is fake profiles. Teens love to do this. Any smart, creative users will use a parent and adult profile. In other words, that things that I'm okay with my parents seeing, and then a secret, like, okay, this is for my peers and my parents aren't going to see this. But sometimes it's also for bullying purposes too. So fake profiles is a big problem that is out there. All right, bullying is a major problem on social media platforms. Private anonymous comments are commonplace, and reactions as well. So have you guys had any examples, or have you guys seen anybody been bullied on any of these social media websites? No, not yet. I'm thankful that you guys haven't seen it yet, but it can get ugly really, really quick. It can also be a very easy time drain, right? It's intended to keep users on and rewarded. Remember me talking about the gambling function? A lot of times social media sites are designed like that to kind of keep you glued on and rewarded. One of the other things, I don't have a slide for this, but I should have included this. Sexual content is also a major concern with any social media platform. There's both to produce and consume sexually explicit content. That's a temptation that's out there for teens as well, and it is readily and easily available on any of those sites. Now, I don't want to say that all social media is bad. I hope you're not hearing me say that. It's just there are delights and dangers, and I'm kind of touching on some of the dangers tonight. There are some fun things, but it takes a lot of careful monitoring to have fun with it, have the delight, and without a lot of the danger that comes with it. All right, so I did want to give you guys an opportunity to discuss a little bit, but as you're kind of thinking about boundaries to consider and discuss, there's two things that kind of drives a lot of the negativity that comes with social media and cell phones, etc. And some of that negativity is oriented around two main things. One is anonymity and accessibility. So what do I mean by that? Anonymity is like I can do things that nobody else is going to know about. So if a teen or child thinks that I can do things and nobody's going to know what I'm doing, they're more likely going to do it, right? That's what anonymity means. Accessibility means is that if on that impulse, I can go do it. Like if I have that initial thought, it's right there. I can just jump into it right away. So I didn't touch on this tonight, but pornography is an example of this. Like it used to be, like before the advent of the internet, if you wanted pornography, you had to go to the store to buy the dirty magazine. But now, a simple internet search can put you in pornography. So that's the accessibility portion of it. That's why the pornography industry has exploded, because it's so readily and easily accessible now, whereas in the past, it was harder to get. So anonymity, so being anonymous, that's a problem, and also accessibility. So fences and accountability. So where is that fence going to be for your child, your youth, and how are you going to hold them accountable to those boundaries? What would be the consequences should they cross a fence and step across that boundary line? So I have some areas for you guys to consider, and this is where I'm hoping like parent groups can maybe pair up and think through this a little bit. I don't expect you to have this nailed down tonight, but here's some areas that I think would be good to know. Number one is platforms. So which social media platforms or what apps, you could say, are you going to let your child be on? I would suggest probably not all of them, probably just a handful. Is your child's account going to be public or private? In other words, available to the world or private? I'm not going to tell you how I'm going to answer that right now, but I really want to. How are you going to monitor the activity on that platform? So if you're going to let them on a social media site, how are you going to make sure that you know what they're up to and what they're doing? Here's another one that I think is important is time. How much time is reasonable for your child to be on that cell phone and social media? So is it 30 minutes, an hour, 2 hours? You see how many put the earlier statistic up of 5 hours, and some are on it for 5 hours plus. I've talked to some teens, and it's not necessarily cell phones in general, but a lot of times there's media extended. So it's like cell phones, social media, and also video games and television all going on at the same time. And so they're constantly glued into this world of entertainment. And it's interesting. I was talking to a couple of youth not too long ago, and it sounded like one of the guys I was talking to was spending anywhere from like 3 to 4 hours a night playing video games. And nothing wrong with video games, but at some point it gets to be a little bit too much. So are there certain times when that child should have the cell phone off and put away? So for example, family dinner. You know, is that the appropriate place to have your cell phone on, notifications up, so it's buzzing when you guys are trying to have family dinner? Let me give you an example of when I was growing up. I know I'm dating myself, so that's okay. When I was growing up, it was in the 90s, and my family had this rule where it was we were to not have guests, visitors, or phone calls for family dinner. So we would take the phone off the hook. You guys remember those days you take the phone off the hook, and so when anybody called, they get the busy signal. And we do that for an hour. Ours was like from 5 p.m. to 6 p.m. That was our family dinner time. And nobody was supposed to, if somebody knocked on the door or whatever, it was like, hey, now it's time for you to get out. This is our family time. This is time that we've set apart for our family today. And that was just one example of when you might say, you know, that phone should be off and put away. When should the device be off and stored? So there might be a certain time of day, for example, like 7, 8 o'clock at night. It's like, okay, it's time for that device, that media to just go away for the night. Like you've had it long enough. It's time for that to just go away. By the way, when I'm putting some of this up, they're good reminders for us, probably too, as adults, like just to have some more discipline with our own time and our own usage of these things. And I'm approaching this from the angle of being a youth pastor, but also, like I mentioned at the very beginning, when I've kind of been working through this, there's a lot of, there's some things that I probably need to work on too. Okay, so I should be pointing at my computer, which is back there. Places would be another area to think about boundaries. Are there places where your child can have their phone and places where they should not have it on? So for example, can they have it at school, their bedroom, a family room, dining room? Where is it that they're allowed to be on their device? For example, I would suggest, in particular, I would definitely take off the bedroom as a good place to have a cell phone, because a lot of times your child or whoever will be talking to who knows who for who knows how long, for hours on end, and it can create a lot of problems, potentially. All right, so where is your child prohibited from using phone and platforms? So permitted is where they can, prohibited is where they cannot. Okay, what about the content? So who and what is your child going to be able to follow and consume content from? Friends, family, celebrities, news? Like who is it exactly, especially if they're going to be on Instagram or Snapchat or whatever, or YouTube, who is that person that you want them consuming content from? this is all about content. So what steps might you take to stop unwanted content and post? So to just kind of screen that out, you maybe need to preview it before, it's like, hey, before you jump on this site, I want to take a look and kind of see what's coming up in your feed before you go ahead and jump on that platform. I don't know, what might be some steps you might take? And what information is acceptable for your child to have and share? So with who are they going to share it with? Is it going to be text, video, pictures? What kind of content is allowable? I would suggest that maybe you include your child and youth in developing some of these boundaries, so because they're going to probably go over a little bit better. So for example, like time. Hey, what do you think is a reasonable amount of time for you to be spending on your cell phone? And they might give you something like 2 hours or something like that. You're like, well, I was thinking more like 30 minutes. So let's kind of go meet in the middle here a little bit, and we'll say an hour. Let's try an hour. You know, it's like I was thinking 30 minutes would be enough for you to check your social media. All right. Evaluate some boundaries from time to time. So you might find that some boundaries are serving their purposes pretty well. You might find some other boundaries don't really, I guess, aren't really all that important. I don't say important, but they don't really connect to your kid because it's not really something they're interested in. So it might be you had a boundary and it's like, well, it's just not really for that purpose at that time. Maybe there's an inconsistent boundary that you found out, like, you know what, that boundary that we developed wasn't actually exactly fair for what you need. So if maybe you haven't had this discussion with your kid regarding cell phones or social media, what steps might you begin to build some of those boundaries? My suggestion is to probably, it's going to be harder if you haven't had these to develop them. My guess is it might take a few weeks, even a few months to get to the point where those boundaries are acceptable. At the end of the day, you guys as parents, you have a God-given authority over your child. And some of your decisions that you make as a parent, your kid is not going to like. Let me remind you, you're your child's parent, not their friend. Right? Sometimes it's hard to remember because we want our kids, and even as a youth pastor and as a teacher, I want my kids to like me. It's always in the back of my head, but I know, like, sometimes it's like, no, I have a God-given authority, and when they're stepping outside of that, I sometimes need to do things that they don't like because I know it's what's good for them. And they might not understand it at the time. So the cool thing, though, about boundaries, though, and they might not, most teens and children aren't going to admit this, is they all want to know where that line is. That's one of the reasons they're always trying to push up against that line. If you have that child who's always like, oh, there's the line, how close to that line can I get? Because they want to know that line is there, and it's a consistent line, and it's not just going to move depending on the mood of that parent. They want those consistent boundaries. So sometimes their child might not, quote unquote, like you at that time, but they're going to respect you and your leadership more in the home when you hold that boundary consistently. So I did have some parent control software that are up there. So these are just monitoring tools. These are just some names of them. So Qustudio is a configurable tool for all sorts of devices, including smartphones. Their Kaspersky Safe Kids is one. Norton LifeLock family. They work on all devices except Macs, and it's similar to the first two. There's one more as well that I would put up there, which is called Boomerang. It's mobile only, parental control and software. So some of those earlier ones like Qustudio and Norton LifeLock, that's for like both computers and also cell phones. But no matter what your monitoring software is, where there is a will, there is a way. Our kids are smart, probably smarter than us a lot of times when it comes towards technology. And so a lot of times they figure out ways around the blocking. Now, part of the thing that we're doing with, creating boundaries and having some of these things in place is it makes the access and anonymity harder. So I don't think there's ever going to be a way to totally eliminate it, but it's going to make it more difficult. And when you make it more difficult, the behavior is less likely. So that's just and as parents, that's a big challenge that you guys face. So what I was hoping to do is to let you guys kind of talk with each other a little bit in terms of these boundaries, in terms of like some of the maybe some boundaries you currently have, or maybe some boundaries you want to develop and kind of share, so you guys can kind of share some of the ideas that you've come up with as far as the boundaries and accountability go for helping your kid navigate the world of social media and cell phones. So we'll say groups. Can we can do like groups of 4 or 5. Does that work? You guys work together and just kind of talk about some of the boundaries that you've established with your kids, or maybe for yourself even, and that you found to be helpful and beneficial. So, yeah, Brent?
I was just going to say, because I got to get to one, is one thing about Kaspersky.
Yeah.
You need to know is that the corporate offices are in Russia, and Kaspersky were being used by our government, and they got rid of it because of that in 2017, I believe it is.
Yeah.
Because there is concern about that.
Yeah.
There's 3 other resources that are really good that I found. One is, it's called, they're Netflix videos. It's called the Social Dilemma.
Yeah.
And the other one is Great Hack, is the other one.
Yeah.
But the other thing is on Right Now Media, which we have access to through the church.
Yeah.
There's 2 videos called Redeem the Screen, which are excellent. One is for adults, the other is for youth.
Yeah.
Those are really good.
Yeah, and if you guys want more information as well, you have a whole list of, at the very back of your booklets, I have a whole list of a lot of where I got this information. So hopefully that helps you in this as well, if you want to go dig into some of these websites more, because I just did an overview. If you want to get a little bit more into, say, Instagram or Snapchat or something, I have some sources that are linked there that you can go check out and maybe get a better idea of that. So let's go ahead and break up in our groups of like 4 and 5, and I will ask at about 10, 15 minutes, what are some of the boundaries you guys came up with that you don't mind sharing? Maybe you currently have them with your kids, or maybe a boundary you'd like to get established with your youth and kids. They just kind of want to hear, like, or maybe if you had youth and kids, what kind of boundaries you think would be good ideas. So, because I got some people here who are empty nesters. So for my empty nesters, maybe some things that maybe you think would be good ideas. Because, yeah, anyway, I didn't want to leave you guys out if you don't have youth and kids in the household. So yeah, groups of 4 or 5, and I will stop talking, let you guys have your talk things over, and hopefully this has been helpful for you guys. So do I need to help you guys figure out groups?